Good evening and welcome to the Cheese Room podcast. You got a brief glimpse of us just there because my computer decided to freeze as I pressed the opening titles. Fun and games. Welcome to the Cheese Room. My name is John. I'm coming to you from the south coast of the UK. And tonight we will be discussing a centre. No, let's not discuss any centre forwards at Tottenham. Let's leave that. We'll be discussing our first preseason friendly, Ange Postecoglou and Ange Ball, his comments, some centre backs we may or may not sign by the time we're all 85. And we've got a game against Leicester on the weekend. And joining me all the way across Europe in Vienna is a man who's going to meet another cheesehead tomorrow, I believe. HG.
Yeah, I know that Jack from North Carolina, the other Jack in America, is in Vienna right now with his family. So
Zoshin.
yeah, it'll be fun to see him. He came on a relatively good day today because it's not stinking hot, but it will be tomorrow and it will be on Sunday. But it's good to be talking Spurs. It's pretty much my only passion in life, and I get to share it with a whole bunch of people. So thanks for having me on.
What's the most cliche tourist activity you would say in Vienna?
Well, people come to Vienna for the classical music a lot, but Mozart's not really here, right? So, obviously Mozart lived in Salzburg. He did live in Vienna for a bit, and there's a Mozart museum. But I think cliche, it's weird that on all the kind of promotional material that the city send out, they have this big Ferris wheel that's over 100 years old, like 125 years old, and it's okay. But I think if I was gonna sell Vienna, it probably wouldn't be on a Ferris wheel. It might be on some other cool stuff, and there are lots of cool things here. But yeah, I feel like for English speakers, music is what brings them here. I think, but for other people, they come because it's a nice city. I think the Italians come here all the time. But yeah, I'm not really sure.
Like the answer.
Thank you for that. I was going to say your other passion surely is your daughter.
Yeah, I mean, more if she loved the Spurs too, she'd be more important in my life. But no, she likes what she likes, which is great. And we had some fun yesterday going to the local theme park, actually where the Ferris wheel is. But yeah, no,
There you go. Kevin's got it. Locations. There you go. And talking of location, across the pond in New York, Jack, how are you?
I'm good. I'm kind of disappointed the other David Harris isn't here because this is potentially my last recording of the Friday sort of shows in Crown Heights. I'm going to be moving to another location in Brooklyn, and the sirens that used to happen during kind of more the winter time, will be no more. He'll not be able to kind of enjoy those. So if David Harris does listen to this at some stage, let him know that he actually missed the last and only, chance to maybe hear the sirens.
Oh, so Davo has just moved house himself, but I think he's got his boys for the next 3 weeks, so he won't be around on this show, unfortunately, for a few weeks. But obviously, Davo lives in Australia, and HG, there seems to be a complete lack of Aussies tonight. Can you think of why that might be? Is England are tonking them in the cricket?
Maybe they haven't woken up and realised exactly what the situation is right now and just praying for rain. But yeah, it's been a good couple of days to be English. I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't seen any of it. I did see what the scores was and what England need to do. But yeah, Australia are winding their necks in just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, shall we discuss Tottenham Hotspur and football?
Oh yeah.
Where shall we start? Do we want to start with Harry Kane, or do we want to start with the game on Tuesday? What do we think? Jack?
We could do what Ange Postecoglou has had to do, which is pretty much handle 13 questions in a row from the very beginning on Harry Kane, and then the rest of it's about other related things, on Spurs. So maybe we should just do what he's had to do, swallow the pill, so to speak, and just and do it now. So what's your first question on Harry Kane? I mean, I could lead it if you like, but yeah. What do we have?
Should we start on Charlie Eccleshare's tweet? Ange Postecoglou clear on Kane's situation. I think for everyone concerned, we don't want to be doing it for too long. I don't think that's good for anyone. I don't think it's good for Harry, and I don't think it's good for the club. I mean, I think he said all the right moves there. And what's your view, Jack?
I feel like he did say the right things while not saying nothing. I mean, sometimes you can say the right things and also kind of say nothing at the same time, and the situation hasn't changed. I feel like he did kind of share some type of grievance in the fact that he's not willing to wait forever for this, to resolve itself. And he does seem to have some type of, anxiety and anticipation about it, which is good to hear. And at least to know that he's not just completely disregarding it. Like, I feel like Nuno kind of did that, where he just sort of, like, even though he didn't like the media when it came to the Harry Kane questions, he just sort of gave just answers that just weren't really real answers of any kind. And so this is actually at least a bit more insight into it. I think what Spurs should do for Postecoglou's sake, for Kane's sake, and for their own sake is to establish some sort of deadline before the actual transfer window ends about whether Harry Kane is actually on board with signing a new contract with Spurs, or if his heart really is set on going to a club like Bayern, who are maybe prepared to offer, let's say, close to 100 million for him to go there. And I think that's what would probably be the most sensible move for Spurs, is to at least get where Harry Kane's head and heart is at, maybe by close to the end of the transfer window. I'd be, as much as it would hurt us, I'd be willing to let go of Harry Kane close to the end of the transfer window if we had some sort of other striker or whatever lined up also to come in, if his head and heart were really, let's say towards Bayern. But it does seem like he's potentially capable of being convinced, depending on how this transfer window goes and how much Postecoglou makes an impression on him, and how much the rest of the players that come into the team and, build this sort of squad for the rebuild, impress him. And I think he's always been pretty clear about, as long as he feels like there's a chance to win trophies and that there's a pathway that's led towards winning trophies, that he'll stay here. And there's a chance that Spurs could convince him of that this summer. If they don't do that, then he's not getting it.
Hang on. All right, look, I'm going to try and be Harry Kane at this particular point. All right, hopefully a bit more eloquent. But Harry Kane
not as good
said,
at football.
No, definitely not as good as football. Definitely not. Look, Harry Kane has said the same thing for years. Jack is absolutely right. And why has he said that? Because it's meant very little. Like, oh yeah, if Spurs do the right thing, then I will consider it, is about as non-committal as you can get. Is as in, it's not up to me. It will be along to other people before I even think about making a decision. And you know what? I might make fun of it, but it's the smart thing to do for Harry. And I suspect that if Spurs went to him and said, hey, look, Harry, we really want to know what you're thinking, Harry may well say along the lines of, well, this is what I'm thinking. And nothing will change. I genuinely think Harry Kane would love to run his contract out at Spurs. I suspect that would, like, it's weird. Like, that's what I would recommend him to do if I was his agent. I think that's the best move for him right now. But of course, he has to deal with all this nonsense beforehand. But I don't think if we said to Kane, hey, what are you thinking? He would come up with anything different than what Jack had quoted there. He's going to be non-committal.
Mm-hmm.
If he has a really good first 6 months of the season at Spurs, then he might be interested in signing in January. But let's face it, if we have a bad second half of the season, then he'll want to be a free agent again. So I feel weirdly that it's not really Spurs that have to make a move. That if this is ever going to get sorted, the person to do that is probably Kane.
Or
but I don't
Bayern.
think it's in his interest to do that. Bayern have no say. I mean, Bayern can say whatever they want.
Or, I mean, they stump up the cash that Levy would be more capable of listening to, kind of thing. Like,
but again, like, I mean, they're just offers. Like, to me,
right.
like, Levy could say, "Hey, I'm willing to take 110 million," and Kane's like, "Yeah, but I don't want to go." Right? Like, Kane is the decision maker here. Right? Kane might say, I'm open for everything. And you know what? Why wouldn't you say that? You want to have as many options as possible. But I don't really believe that Kane is open for every single possibility. I think he wants to get out of Spurs. I do think that. And
without saying it.
Yeah, without saying it. And,
Yeah.
and the crazy thing for me is, like, if he can, like, to me, like, if I'm Kane, I've got two options. One is just to say what I think, and two is to be silent and just back the questions away. If I came out and said, I want to run my contract down and see what my options are next summer, what does that really do for Spurs fans? I mean, how would you feel if you said that, guys?
I feel like, just to connect something here, last time and this isn't even my original idea, someone else said this, but last time he came out and was honest to Spurs fans about where he wanted to go in his future, got pretty much kind of destroyed by us and pretty much got fried by us and, cast away. And I think he's just going to go for this sort of approach of not
But
actually, like you kind of said, committing or saying anything, because that would mean sort of someone else kind of eventually decides for him and he doesn't have to look like the bad guy like maybe he did before in
But
the
aren't the
Man City scenario.
situations different? I mean, like, the idea of going to Manchester City or leaving the Premier League and going to Bayern, like, I think we all know that most Spurs fans would be much more amenable to the idea of him going to Germany than they were to him going to. So, like, I understand if it was a simple, well, I did it last time and it didn't work and they hated me for about, 3 months, and then we all forgot about it when he started scoring again. I feel as if they are different situations. And, like, bearing in mind, Spurs may have a lot of excitement going on around the club. Like, everyone seems pretty excited about Ange. The fans seem to be much more unified behind the football, at least the football side of things. Uh, it's not a great time to come out and say, "Hey, like, I don't want to be here long term," but by saying I want to run my contract down doesn't mean I don't want to be here long term. Like, let's be honest, it probably does. But whatever happens, like if Spurs were to sign Kane to a new contract, it's going to have to compete with the contracts that he would get elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, like, whether he signs it now, which would be fantastic, or he signs it next summer, it's still going to be, I imagine, close to $500,000 a week, frankly.
Yeah.
And so it just feels like.
But it sounds like it's not going to be just money to convince him. It's going to have to be, obviously, I think some sort of major squad overhaul, because I think what Levy wants is, I think Levy would be prepared to offer him $500,000 a week. But what Levy probably isn't prepared to do is offer him half a million a week and also buy, probably, let's say, 80 million's worth of a defense and maybe some other players sprinkled in there. He's going to have to maybe spend more than he's prepared to do, or at least what he's usually used to convince Kane that there's some type of, change and there's some type of, future with Postecoglou, and that the rebuild isn't happening all that slowly.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said before on here that, like, if Kane chose to leave this summer, like if a deal was done with Bayern, right, and he chose to leave this summer, that's helping Spurs out. As much as it sucks, right, the idea of him leaving next year on a free to go abroad, even to go abroad, doesn't really help Spurs a great deal. Taking the money, hopefully, if you use it wisely, at least helps Spurs. Kane can say, you know what, I did all I could. The club decided to accept the money, and I'm going to go. And I'm going to go abroad because that doesn't hurt Spurs. And really, at this stage, like, I mean, if we're thinking that Bayern are going to pay £100 million for one extra year of Harry Kane, right? I mean, to guarantee that they get him for a year, but for one extra year, Kane is thinking, well, I mean, I might take 50% of that as a signing on fee next summer. I mean, it's a huge amount of money.
He actually potentially loses a lot of money by not signing on a free as well. There's that too, because most players get a huge chunk for signing on a free, as well as the agents. And we all know Charlie Kane has practically nothing to do each and every day, and he's, this could be his big payoff. So he's, he'd probably rather him sign on a free.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To me, if I'm Kane, I want to run my contract out. I want to see what options I have, and that means that this won't get resolved. But Kane can still come out and say that, and I don't think, like, it's no different to what Eriksen did. I mean, Eriksen basically said, "What, with a year left on his contract, I'm not going to sign a new deal." He told the club that he wanted out at the end of his deal, before whenever it was, and he gave the club time to find a solution. Right, which, as we saw in the documentary,
we've just signed him, Maddison.
Sorry,
we've just signed the solution, Maddison. 4 years later.
Yeah, no, but at the time in the documentary, Levy was very much like almost unaware that this was actually going to happen. That Eriksen had done it once before at Ajax. Do you know what I mean? He said to Ajax, "I'm not signing a new deal. You can sell me now, or I'll leave on a free." And the same thing happened with Spurs. And Spurs dug their heels in, kind of thought, he's not going to leave us. Where Eriksen clearly decided that even though he loved Spurs, he wanted something different. I don't think he ever planned on being a Man United player. I think he thought he was going to be at Inter Milan for the next 5 years. Why wouldn't you think that? But I feel as if Kane was honest and actually said, right now, my best move is this. Is it hurting the club? I don't think so. It might hurt him, but even then, I don't think so, because the honesty involved is better than where we are now. If
Yeah,
the club
clarity
knew
and
exactly the
transparency.
situation,
Yeah.
transparency. No one knows everything, and everyone's waiting for the other person to do anything. And the one person who really knows and can decide these things is Kane. So
Yeah.
again, like, as much as like
Or he can
no
get the
one
ball
wants,
rolling. Yeah.
no one wants him to do what Sol Campbell did, right? Where he lied repeatedly for the entire time. I'm going to sign a new deal. No one expects that from Kane. But to come out and say, "Hey, look, guys, I love the way that Ange is doing things. I'm excited for the season. I'm not going to go anywhere." Then maybe in January the situation changes if Spurs aren't having a great year. But right now, if he comes out and says it, there are no questions to be asked. Bayern can move on. Kane can move on. The whole club could, like, it kicks it down the road a little bit, of course, but it's still transparency.
I think also
Yeah.
last thing I'll mention is that part of the anxiety from the fan base, I think, just seems to come from the fact that everybody else seems to have bought into Postecoglou, like, in some shape or form, and we haven't gotten that sort of verbal confirmation from Kane. Whereas even Sonny, right, the second or maybe the also biggest player in the team, has given a very big, sort of outstanding sort of, confirmation that he loves Spurs and he's looking forward to this Postecoglou era, where Harry Kane has not done that. And a lot of players like Basuma as well have shown a lot of faith. Madison has shown a lot of faith. Everybody seems to having a grand time with him, and Harry Kane has not indicated anything like that yet. And I think that's where the anxiety is coming from too.
Even that thing that you just said that Son said, everything that Son said may well be true. Doesn't mean he's going to stay for 2 seasons. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm excited for this to happen. Well, great. We all are. We're all excited to see an attacking Spurs again. That makes sense. So I feel like the silence from Kane is actually hurting everyone rather than helping people. I understand that. I think personally, his whole career has been about him. What's best for him? I know that sounds crazy when he signed a 6-year deal at Spurs, but I genuinely thought that Kane is very much. He's very. What's the word I'm looking for? Just the kind of self is number one. Does that make sense? Like, I do think he cares about the team. He wants the team to do well, but Kane is about Kane. And that's not a negative, it's just who he is. And that single-mindedness has turned him into the football player that he is. But I just think that at this stage, when we can sit here and say he's got one year of or one large contract left, that it's okay for him to think about him. But if he came out, he said to me, if he comes out and says, "Guys, look, I've got a year left. I intend on seeing my contract out." Well, Spurs can't change that fact. Bayern can't change that fact. No one can change that fact. And so the only way that would kind of come back to hit him in the face is if the fans see, as they did with Eriksen, that he's not putting the effort in. I mean, I don't believe that about Eriksen, but the fact that was the story about the fans. The fans thought Eriksen had checked out. So that's why he got the hate he did. If you don't see that with Kane, maybe I'm naive, but I don't really see a negative of just coming out and saying the truth. I think we're all old enough and adult enough to understand that with the situation that Kane's in, you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that there's a number of points. Number one, if Levy's got no intention of selling, he just says, "We're not selling." Because everyone pretty much knows if he says that, then Kane will be staying. And Kane just needs to get on with it and accept that there's a very good chance that he's going to leave on a free transfer next year. If he has got a price, he probably needs to say to Bayern, "This is the price." And also do what Dortmund are very good at: set a deadline, be it, I don't know, the 1st of August or something, saying, if you do not reach agreement by this point, he's staying. From Kane's point of view, if he does see the year out and leaves on a free transfer, I'd be astonished if he went to Bayern next year. So I think this is Bayern's only chance to get him. So they've got to make a decision. Do they want to pay? And I think James said it in the chat, 120 million. I think 100 million is probably the price. But with 5 teams getting into the Champions League next year,
Most likely, yeah.
If we've got Kane, we've got a good chance of doing it. If we haven't got Kane, it's going to be a hell of a lot harder, even with this new style of football. We're going to have this bit of a time where the team's evolving. It's going to take time for us to get it right. We're not going to go and win the first 6 or 7 games, are we? We've got to be realistic here, especially with the current defense. So it's all those things. Personally, I want him to stay, even if he leaves on a free transfer next year. If I was him, I'd stay, get a much bigger contract, and also a much bigger pool of teams. At the moment, there's one team he can go to, and possibly United, but we know Levy won't sell him to United. So if he wants to stay in the Premier League, he might as well just see his contract out.
Yeah, which everyone seems to think that he does want to. I mean, these Bayern links have come from Bayern mostly. And I mean, there was a video done by 442. I think 442 was a football magazine, but they obviously do football videos on YouTube. And they came out and did a video today. It was like, why Tottenham should keep Kane for one more season. And they brought up an example of what Dortmund did with Lewandowski 10 years ago, where basically Lewandowski said, I'm not going to sign a new deal. Bayern basically said, hey, you can take 25 million from us now, or we'll take him next year for free because he's coming to us. So it was all kind of out there and open, and Dortmund decided, rightly or wrongly, that they were going to keep Lewandowski for that last season. And in the video, they kind of talk about how, as much as it hurt Dortmund short term, they were able to buy people in. I think they bought Aubameyang that summer, and they bought people in that actually, when it came to turning things around, it happened a lot quicker than it might have done had they just sold Lewandowski. Because, like, as much as Kane might, like, I mean, I saw a comment talking about how if Kane gets injured, then he now has no contract. That's true. That's definitely true. I mean, that's the risk for Kane. But, like, Kane hasn't had a serious injury in, what, 2.5 seasons now? Since COVID, really. It's been a long time. He clearly looks after himself. He's played every game. Like, I think Kane would bet on himself that that's probably not going to happen now. But I just feel as if for Spurs, like, if he left on a free, Spurs are now the club financially that we could take that hit.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
It's not where we were 10 years ago when we're selling Bale or when we sold Carrick or Berbatov, all those moves that were basically designed that we would reinvest to move up a step and reinvest to move up a step. Like, our revenue
or not to feel the hit. Yeah,
exactly. Our revenue is basically, I mean, I don't want to say at its peak, but this is what we should expect now. We know what the stadium's going to bring in financially. There'll be fewer games this season because there's no Europe, but pretty much we understand where we are. And so, although it's not ideal, how much did we spend last year? Like, we spent 60 million on Richarlison, 25 on Bissouma.
We spend around 100 million on average usually.
And another like 45 million on Porro in January. Like, there is money to spend if Kane goes on a free. The downside to me on Kane leaving on a free is not the money; it's the fact that he could go within the Premier League. That to me is the downside. That I'm not concerned about getting money now. It's just a question of, well, if you wait, then maybe he shows up at City. Maybe, like, again, I think, like, he'll get paid a lot at Man United, but are they that much more certain to win things if that's the thing? Has he dreamed of? Did he grow up in East London as a Man United fan, just like David Beckham did? Like, we don't know. There are lots of things that we don't know. Yeah. But to me, it feels like Kane is the one who can start the solution to where we are right now. No one else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the advantage of Bayern is it guarantees that he's going to win the Bundesliga at least once in 2 years, probably 3 in 3 years. So, if we were to sell him, no doubt Levy would want to put a buyback in there of some kind, which would be very much aimed in our favour, you'd think.
But I don't think.
Or does he even sign a long contract with Bayern or anything like that?
If they're paying 100 million, they'd have to put him on a 3 or 4 year contract.
Yeah,
wouldn't they?
Yeah,
they'd have to.
Yeah. I'm sort of, last thing that I would mention again with, because HG did bring this up. When I first heard about the news of sort of, this all, and, or not even news about it, just the whole debate about losing Kane on a free, I did sort of think that we are in a position where we have so much to do this summer when it comes to other areas that the to-do list is already quite long when it comes to getting out Deadwood, as well as rebuilding the defense and rebuilding and kind of touching in other areas to sort of make them look better too. That if you then also lost Harry Kane, it's like your to-do list is so long that you're almost not going to be able to get all of it done really in the summer. And you might end up then sort of leaving a lot of it undone. And how good is that really, like kind of HG said, like how much does that save you, or how much does that really help you having that 80 extra million or whatever, when maybe you might not even get everything that you need to get done. Whereas maybe if you did end up losing him the following summer and you get everything you need to do in the defense done, everything you need to do in the midfield done, in other areas, you could sort of feel like that the following summer is just taking the hit of losing Kane and trying to figure out how much money you need to spend in areas to, solve the Harry Kane problem and solve the Harry Kane absence. So it feels like you could kind of just, divide it, one and the other for kind of fixing the problems instead of doing it all at once.
And if you take, like, with Poch's team, right? Like, at that point in time, we were obviously planning to build the stadium, or we'd started building it. And it was still that case of, if we want to strengthen things, we have to sell a big player. So we sold Walker because he seemed as if he was the best asset to sell, right? Well, right now, Spurs, I think, by selling the deadwood that we decide we don't want, could make 50, 60 million if I'm being generous. Like, if Højbjerg is one of those to go, if Reguilon is one of those to go, if Brian Hill is one of the, like, there are a number of players that are worth. We've got 10 million for Winks. Do you know what I mean? Like, that there are worth some money. That if the question is, hey, I can sell 4 or 5 that I need to sell anyway and get 50 to 60 million, or I can sell one player, the best player that we've had in my entire life, because I don't really remember Hobble, right? So the best player, and I get double that, but I lose the best player in the team, then yeah, maybe the best thing is to do just focus on getting rid of the deadwood and trying to reinvest. The issue that we have is that, of course, deadwood doesn't usually get shifted early, right? Deadwood gets shifted at the end of the, we for whatever reason, we struggle to. There aren't any teams in Saudi Arabia that want our players, and everyone within Europe is thinking, "Hey, like, we can wait till the end because Spurs have to shift, whether it's on loan or whatever, they have to." But I just feel like, like, if Kane really wants out, then he can come out and say it publicly, and that's fine, right? Then a deal would probably get done, almost certainly get done, right? If he says that he wants to stay to run his contract out, then everyone knows the situation. There'll be no more distractions about it. I saw a comment, or in one of the Athletic articles, and the writer talked about how everyone in the industry expects Spurs to sell because they can't countenance Kane going on a free. And I was just like, but it's a football club. Like, everyone can leave on a free, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to countenance the idea that that's possible. Like, again, like, Spurs could say, yeah, we'll accept bids of 10 million. And if Kane doesn't want to go anywhere, it doesn't matter. He will take the money next year. So I just feel as if it continues to hurt us, or if Postecoglou doesn't really want to answer these questions anymore, then it's going to be on Kane to sort it out and just come out and be honest about what he wants, and not get Bayern to, allegedly say what he thinks. I mean, that's just sad. That's pathetic. And I do think it's different to 2 years ago when City came calling.
Okay, so Archibald, to put this up, 80 million plus to invest in the team to support Ange. 20, I'm going to grammatically correct you, fewer goals conceded, and 10 to 15 goals. Number 9 replaces Kane. It does, but I don't want to finish 8th or 9th, or where was it 8th we finished last year? I can't remember.
Yeah.
We need an extra 20 goals on top. That's the thing, and the idea is we can see fewer goals and score as many, or if not more. So I sort of get where you're coming from.
You could hope that if Kane hadn't played those games last season, whoever did play would have scored 10 to 15, right? You'd have hoped, considering, even though we were playing defensive football, let's say 10. Let's be a bit, bit pessimistic about it. Kane gets 30 and the other guy gets 10. So so there's 20 goals that we need to make up somehow. Well, maybe I'm being optimistic, but playing in the opposition's half this season should help us score more goals. It just should. I'd be amazed if we don't score more goals, because half the goals that we scored last year felt flukes, or it was Kane doing Kane things. If there are suddenly 3 or 4 players that can actually help each other, I think 2 goals a game is probably something that we should expect. That doesn't mean that we'll score 2 in every game, but I think as an average, 75 to 80 goals in the Premier League, I think Postecoglou's football demands that that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, we did score a lot of goals, and obviously Harry scored a lot of them, and Bentancur was our third top scorer, was he? I think, and he missed almost half
Yeah.
the season. So, and that Bentancur and Højbjerg scored goals when we, on the rare occasions we switched to a 3-5-2
Yeah.
because they were bumming on. I do think, especially with Maddison, he scored 10 goals, I think, last season for Leicester in the relegated team. You'd expect him to get 8 plus.
Yeah.
Plus, when as and when Bentancur comes back, and if we sign another midfielder, I don't know. That you're right. I think there's definitely more goals to come from that. I think if Perisic stays, he'll be
Yeah.
used as a reserve left winger, and I think we'll see more from him as well.
And I mean, this is like if you imagine that the front three stays as being Kane, Son, and Kulusevski, right? Which perhaps we shouldn't, but let's say we do. Suddenly, with all of these loan players, these attacking players that Conte didn't want, we've got options off the bench that could do something different. If you want someone to thread the eye a little bit more in midfield, then maybe Dombele is your man because he sees those passes that very few do, right? If you need someone who's a better crosser of the ball, then Perisic will come on. It's just yeah, we all agree on that. But it's but you see what, like, I feel like we're going to have like different keys to try and get the lock. That's bad English, but you know what I mean. Like, we're not just going to say this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do the same thing with different players. We'll have different players. Like if Richarlison comes on, he offers something different to Kane. I suspect if Richarlison came on to play up top, then Kane would move back into one of the attacking midfielder roles. I think that would still work. The system doesn't necessarily have to change, but the people you have in it will offer us something different. If you want a bit more pace, then maybe Brian Hill will be around. If you need a bit more trickery, then maybe Solomon. And I think Ange is smart enough to know what would work. There you go, 114 goals, 11 players. Wow. Wow. I know it's Scottish football, but...
There is that pressure, though, that technically no one in the team, and I agree, like with this sort of system and tactics, like the goals can easily be spread around much more than it was with Conte or Jose Mourinho. Like with Jose Mourinho and Conte, it's very reliant on, a couple of players, a few players to score the majority of the goals. And with Postecoglou, that will be different. At the same time, though, there does still need to be some type of talisman, it feels like, of some kind that you do sort of expect to finish maybe around 20 goals, because the majority of teams, unless I'm wrong, do have some player of some kind, even if they do play a very, sort of aesthetically, pleasing brand of football. They usually have somebody that's finishing around the 20 goal mark and is finishing high up there. And with Kane kind of being the only guy that's consistently finished above 25 goals pretty much a season, Sonny has only finished above 20 goals once. And then Maddison would probably be the next closest. I think, grabbing around like 13 or 14. I think Richarlison's grabbed maybe 12 or 13 before, but there are a lot of players that haven't grabbed because they're mostly really young. It's not like they've only played so long, but there are a lot of players that you would kind of be asking to like basically double what they normally get. And I think most of them could, but there is that sort of fear that, which ones actually don't step up, right? And which ones don't end up, kind of replenishing, and you could get surprised by certain ones that do and certain ones that don't, maybe. And there is that fear.
It's just crazy. Like if you think about, we've got all these attacking fullbacks, right? Like you've got Porro who can cross the ball. You've got now these attacking midfielders: Lo Celso, Dombele, Maddison, Bentancur when he's back. There's goals in those players, and now that we're going to get them closer to the opposition goal, we might see it a bit more often. So, again, I'm being optimistic, right? Maybe they'll all turn to rubbish, and every game will be like what we saw against West Ham, where they can't they can't score until the 70th minute. But I don't know. There are so many reasons to be optimistic that it doesn't feel like it's take the money now or we're going to be rubbish. It doesn't feel that way.
There's 180 of you watching now, and I think since I typed this, we're on about 41 likes. Please do click the like button. That's an awful ratio. Caller from his sick bed, and he's in intensive care, I think. HG, I've known him about, I don't know, 2 years. I've never known a man be so ill. What's wrong with him?
He works so hard in his office that
on Championship Manager.
Yeah, look, I don't know. He's got 2 young kids. Give him his due. He's got 2 young kids. He does work long hours around Christmas time. So okay, maybe that's part of it. Maybe there are lifestyle issues. I don't know him that well, but yeah, he does. He's felt pretty bad all week. So
it could be changing the downstairs keg can be often a lot of work. I've been there before. I've been a bar back. It's like there are times when, like what was the worst thing about being a bar back was like if you worked out or anything like that, like the day before or something, and you felt like a little bit sore. It was like trying to carry like, a keg is like near impossible if, you feel like really sore and your arms feel weaker than usual. So maybe that's what's happened. Maybe he's strained himself.
But yeah, no, he did talk about. I think he's been in bed for a couple of days this week, so it's pretty bad. Because, like, to give Caller his due, sometimes he'll go into work when he's sick, which doesn't help things at all. But
just affects the whole place.
This week has been pretty bad for him. So get well soon, mate.
Yeah, get well. Pray for Ferris. That's it, isn't it? Ferris Bueller. I just want to bring up Antonius is asking, "Good day, Rooty 2. How's the cork hat coming along?" And he has responded, "Big up." I've added a few more. Should be ready for the Shakhtar game. So, Rooty 2, can you tag me or HG on Twitter with a picture once you've done it, and we'll share it on the show.
Yeah, we'd love to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What sort of shape do you think it's going to be?
Do the panel read anything to Maddison being given the temporary number 71 like he's waiting for number 10 shirt? I think there was a few temporary numbers, weren't there?
Yeah. So him and Solomon and Udogie, I think, were the three.
I don't read a lot into it at the moment. I think they're probably just going to see what happens, aren't they, with the squad, and then decide who's getting which number then.
I mean, this is it. Like, what numbers are available? I think 2 is available, but there's a chance that 6.
Not a lot of good creative numbers available. Yeah, like the Salso has taken 18. I believe 23 has been taken.
That's Porro,
You have 17 has been taken. 11's been taken. Number 8's going to be taken, I think, by Basuma. Sonny has number 7. Kane has number 10. Like, you're really, you're losing all the cool looking creative numbers.
Yeah, I haven't known this, but I'm assuming that those numbers are actually kind of set at the end of the transfer window. So are we going to see a situation where
they announce the numbers? They announce it, yeah.
Yeah, so are we going to see a situation where in the first game of the season, Madison's still wearing 71? That would be kind of odd. Like, because
I don't think you can go that high in the Premier League. Yeah, so it would need to be like a 31 or something like that, or whatever.
Okay.
I think they do tend to do it before the season starts for the majority of the squad.
Yeah, but that because that's what we saw. That's what we saw last year with Winks, right? Because Winks was 8, and we all knew he was going, but clearly he wasn't going to give it up. So Bissouma had to be 38. I don't know, but I feel like we do have a lot of numbers in the 20s maybe available. I don't know, but
no, not really.
No, I mean, if the 10,
Forster's 20,
Forster's 20,
Coon's 21, Joe Roden probably going 22, Porro's 23, Jed Spence probably going alone, but he'll keep his numbers 24. Jaffet is 25. We'll come to Jaffet later, I think.
Okay.
Then we have got 26, 27 spare. Ndombele's 28. Sar's 29.
Yeah.
I mean, Bentancur's 30.
So he can't even have 30. Yeah, 31 it is.
if we've taken 31 players on the trip, I mean, that gives you some indication that, and with Brian and, Lloris still at home, I mean, the number 1's going to be available, but no one's going to take that because Vicario has chosen 13. So it's, I mean, I think Madison will take the 10 if it's available. I do think that. But no, 126, it would be nice. But I don't know. I think at some point that they will make changes, but I'm not concerned right now.
King Hoddle with a nice little pun there.
Yeah,
brilliant. So, okay, HG and Jack, just give me your answer. What would you're Daniel Levy? What are you doing with Kane? Make a decision now. Selling or keeping him?
Well, I'm in the keep category. I think I suspect that's what Kane wants, and it's what I would want for Spurs.
I'm willing to let him go on a free. I would be absolutely heartbroken and horrified to see him go to a Premier League team and break the record with a Premier League team and do things with a Premier League team. But at the end of the day, I think we have far too much to do this summer.
Yeah, and things but I mean, this is it. Like we talk about this. Let's say we sell him to Bayern now, right, for whatever fee it is. and then Man City or Man United or Chelsea or whoever are like, well, we'll stump up some of that money for you, and then we'll buy him off you next summer. Like we can't stop Kane from playing in another Premier League team ever. We can't. Like at some point, that will be Kane's decision if he chooses to do it. So I'm not like I don't want him to go to Chelsea, which I think is probably the most likely. I do think it is the most likely within England. Even though they were awful last year, I think that the London tie-in and the fact he's building a house over that side of London and all the rest of it, like there are many things, and Poch is there. There are many things that might send him towards Chelsea. That's going to be Kane's choice, and if Kane chooses to do that, then he'll live with those consequences. But I think right now, Spurs are probably doing the best they can do, and if Kane really wants to go, he needs to say it.
I mean, my answer to this, Harmonic, is why does it matter? Because this season is the first season of Ange Ball. It's going to take a time for that to really kick in. And if we've got basically the best striker in the world, we're going to have a better chance of finishing higher up the league and getting into that Champions League spot, which will then give us the money for the next year. I think that's why it matters. And there is a small, probably 0.5% chance he might stay if he suddenly goes, actually, this team's looking really good. It's unlikely. That's why I said 0.5%.
But this is let's say that we have a good year under Ange and we win one of the cups, right? Let's say the League Cup, which 5 years ago no Spurs fan cared about, but suddenly it's really, really important. Let's say we win the League Cup. Is that going to make Kane stay, or is he going to say, tick that box, see you guys? Like I'm not sure. Like I feel like the only thing that is if Kane's wife says, I don't want to go anywhere at all. And then
does she speak that common? You went very common then, HG. I don't want to go.
No, it wasn't deliberate. It really wasn't deliberate. No,
is that what Katie sounds like?
I am still from Essex. I mean, I can't change that. I haven't spoken like that in a long time, but I can if I need to.
I guess.
I don't know. Like it's why did he sign a 6-year deal? Do you know what I mean? Like there was no reason to sign a 6-year deal, but he still did it.
I think if he was single-minded, he would have left a long time ago, like you brought up earlier. Like I think now he's choosing to be more single-minded than he was in the past, but he wouldn't sign a 6-year deal if he wasn't a Spurs fan and he didn't want to be here as long as he could with the club. And he would have left before this if he really was desperate to win trophies. And if he didn't have all that much love for us, then he would have left, I think, before that, or forced to move of some kind.
Yeah,
so I think now he's choosing, like you said, to be more single-minded than he has in the past, and fair play to him, to be honest. Like that's understandable.
All right, are we done with Kane? That's like 40 minutes on Kane.
Yeah, we did what Postecoglou has to do.
Craig put this tweet up earlier. I said I was going to put it up in the show. So no breaking Kane news. Number 1, may leave this summer if a club meets Spurs' valuation of him. 2, may sign a contract extension during the season. 3, may leave on a free transfer. All bases covered. Yep, journos will continue to use his name for clicks and fame. Job done. Well done, Craig. We could have saved ourselves half an hour there, couldn't we?
Probably.
So,
but we're only doing it for clicks and giggles, right? Isn't that how it is?
Like, that's it. Well, it's 189 people watching. Please do click that like button. And if Kane does leave and you do cry, Jack, that's going to make a hell of an episode on the Irish Hotspur. That's all I'm saying.
I think Dave is going to be more likely to cry before I do. That is his favorite player, and he has fought tooth and nail with anybody that feels like, you have to sell him, and it's easy to sell him. So I think it would be him first. And he is also a big Harry Kane hair enthusiast. He seems to enjoy Harry Kane's various hairstyles and various hair lengths. So I think he would be very sad to see him go. As would Harry Kane.
Maybe we could buy Irish a little wig.
Or even just find somebody that can just pluck one off of his head somehow and then just put it in a plastic bag and send it over. Then that would be enough.
Yeah. Good evening, Dan. You've missed the Harry Kane chat. He's staying. It's job done. So there you go. Yeah, well done. Michael, we will come to the centre backs and the whole malarkey with that sooner or later. But next, shall we discuss our first pre-season friendly of this season on Tuesday?
Yep.
During the day when I was at work, I was desperately trying to get a stream, but work's Wi-Fi was blocking everything. Oh, it was a bit of a nightmare. I saw bits of it. HG, starting lineup, was that pretty much what you expected, or any surprises there? Maybe Tanganga and Skip?
I mean, like we saw it was in the friendly, the kind of the intra squad friendly in training the day before, that back four had been on one side, maybe even the back five. I think the goalkeeper was on that team, so I wasn't too surprised. I just wanted to see who was playing where. So I think I was a bit surprised to see that Skip was playing as an 8, because I'm not sure that that's really going to be his best thing in the system. And I hadn't really considered, that Son wouldn't play. So to see Solomon there, okay, that I didn't really care. I think, we'll get onto this probably on the next slide or one of the next slides. But to me, it was a case of we've got 31 players on the trip. Which ones weren't involved? Which ones had, for whatever, and why? Like, we'll figure out why they weren't on the subs bench, why they weren't involved at all. That was more interesting to me than who started.
There you go. There's your list. This is actually a screenshot of a WhatsApp that HG sent our group. So go on then. Talk about your missing list, HG.
Well, so to me, it looks as if Son had only had one or two training sessions with the team. I think we realised that Son had played internationals. He'd probably gone home to South Korea, and so rather than say, "Hey, fly to London for 2 or 3 days before we all fly out to Australia," the club just said, "We'll see you in Australia." So Son hadn't really trained. I don't know really why Dyer wasn't involved. I think people were talking about he had an operation over the summer, and the club was still, worried about that. Although I'm not sure I buy that. Dombele had been injured in training. Spence, I think there were rumours about Spence having an injury even before they went out, and that maybe he wouldn't go. So maybe there's a lack of training for him. Roden is just awful, and then Scarlett and Keeley are kids. So it's 7 players.
I agree with those explanations.
Okay.
Yeah, Spence was injured the back end of last season. He came back early from his loan at Rennes.
Yeah.
I believe because he was injured. After getting the man of the match against Mbappe and PSG, he literally saw no pitch time at all.
Okay.
So that would make sense.
Yeah, so to me it was a case of who's not involved and why. That's the thing that I was interested in, and it seems as if they all have relatively good reasoning. But yeah, the two 11s that we saw were different and good in various ways, and I think that we were able to see that some players are more suited naturally to what Postecoglou wants Spurs to do than others. That's not a negative on them. It's just some people fit it and some people struggle a bit more.
So, Jack, who were your positives out of the first half team?
Solomon was a huge positive because I think the original transfer was labeled a Levy transfer and was also kind of one that people were really like. I felt like no one got out of their seat for that type of transfer, like versus the James Madison one. It was sort of like, people just sort of accepted that it happened and we're kind of just waiting to see. And he looked very, very sharp. And he also looked like he's impressed a huge majority of the fan base so straight away. Like, felt like nobody was talking about that transfer or really talking about him at all. And then he just had 45 minutes where he's all of a sudden kind of won the fan base over. And I think that's just because he's come off as maybe a much more kind of maybe technical player than even Lucas Moura ever was or Steven Bergwijn really ever was, and players like that. I've even said too, he has that sort of low center of gravity, the way he kind of carries the ball and goes at players. That's a bit like, it's really complimentary to say this, but it's a bit like an Eden Hazard with that sort of like very small, kind of man with a very low center of gravity, who's very quick and can kind of run at you, who's also very eager to run at you, right, and kind of take you on. And I think Solomon has won people over straight away. You could say Basuma had, I would say maybe it felt like he started off a little slow, but then, grew into the game and then all of a sudden was running the midfield like we know he can, kind of almost all on his own. And maybe I would argue Pedro Porro and Reguilon, I just feel like going forward, they were actually a lot better than people gave them credit for. I think Pedro Porro, his delivery is really solid, and I think he almost never really misses a pass, it feels like at times. And Reguilon, I think, has always had a really good cross on him that maybe hasn't always been appreciated. And maybe it was only forgotten, or maybe it was only appreciated once we started seeing Sessegnon unable to get an actual cross into the box in certain games. But I don't know. I thought the first half squad was not really all that impressive for the most part. A lot of them were kind of anonymous, and a lot of them were kind of, like HG said, like in the case of Skip, maybe played in a position that might not really suit them in the long term. Kulusevski, I thought, should have had a brace. In fact, I was a little disappointed with him. I thought he had a bit of the same. I mean, it's only preseason, but he had the same kind of performance that he had kind of in the first, or last season, where he had a lot of chances that he didn't really take or, bury or really, do the most with, and he could have done better with. So that was interesting, but it was more the second half squad for me that was like the most impressive, and actually was playing the most, best version of Postecoglou or Ange ball. Was the second half squad played the best version of it, not the first half.
It's interesting.
Okay,
I
we'll
think.
come to that in a
Sorry,
second.
just
HG,
like
go on.
if I was to pick 3 players from that 11 that played well, right, in those 45 minutes, it would be, or surprised me, let's say, it would be Bissouma, Skip, and Solomon. They were the 3 that kind of stood out as being a good fit for what I mean. Like, because again, I don't think Skip is an 8 at all, but I feel like he adapted pretty well to what he was being asked to do, and he was making runs into the box, and he was, also very aware of what he needed to do defensively, but still he wasn't shy about doing those things. Those were the 3 that I thought did all right, and the 3 that I thought were relatively weak in the system, well, mostly because maybe they're just not suited to it, were Tanganga, sadly, because I feel like, and to be fair, West Ham pressed a lot more in that first half than they did in the second. So those 11 players there had to deal with a lot more. They had to deal with a stronger West Ham. But I think Tanganga struggled a little bit, which is worrying because people are going to press us in the league when we actually play competitive games. I think Reguilon struggled a little bit. I think he's just a bit too manic and really wants to succeed, but just it doesn't. Like, I don't trust
Because
him
he has
going
so many friends on the team.
Well, I mean, I don't trust him going forward. I don't think he's going to choose good options. I think he's a great runner, but I also don't really trust him defensively either because I think he's just over eager, and that's not a great combination. So I think he's in a fast paced system. It doesn't suit him. It doesn't fit him. And then I don't need to say a third really, but I think Maddison struggled a little bit because he was out of position and he was on the left hand side, which I don't think will suit him. I think I saw a comment about Harry Kane wanted to drop deep into the area where Maddison was playing, because that would make sense for Kane being right-footed to kind of move into that inside left. So there were things there, but like, all in all, I mean, we played pretty well in that first half. We just were 2-0 down. But I think that the intensity and the desire to do what Ange wanted them to do was there.
Yeah, Jack, I think the biggest worry was the 2 goals we conceded from crosses, corners come crosses, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, like Reguilon, I actually thought he did really well with the initial clearance, and then he sort of switched off with then the following ball that came in afterwards, which is a bit of a conundrum. And Pedro Porro, I thought actually didn't do all that well to rush out to that one ball from Jared Bowen, and then also from the set piece. Like at this stage, I've almost become numb to set piece goals that we've now conceded. It's like we see it happen so often with Spurs, like over the years, that I'm just waiting for, a season where it doesn't happen all that often. And then I'm left a bit surprised. But yeah, to see, I think it was Pedro Porro and Tanganga, if I'm not mistaken, that were sort of kind of caught in between that, young striker for West Ham. So Tanganga has shown, I think, to be having some things that Dyer and the other people don't have, but he also is not good in the air. And he also sometimes has these kind of lapses of concentration, I'll be honest, I feel like, as a defender as well. And that's kind of come through it. He's conceded a lot of goals with Spurs, I think, from set pieces, Tanganga, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, and I feel like Romero and Tanganga are basically the same defender, only one has composure and one doesn't. But they're both attack
and
dogs.
Better on the ball. And
yeah,
exactly.
And but Tanganga wants to attack. He wants to be close to the man he's marking, but he gets turned quite a lot, which is a bit concerning. But it's like, again, I think
fouls a lot too, I think.
Because he gets caught. I mean, he has no option. The minerals might be there, but at some point with footballers, it becomes a mental thing. It becomes, do I know what to do and when to do it? It's not just a physical game. It's not just a, who's stronger, who can dominate in that way. Because the West Ham striker was clearly no small guy, and Bowen knows how to use his body, and so you've got to be more than that. You've got to be smart, and that does appear to be Tanganga's probably weakness in that area.
I mean, it was a small back four, wasn't it? If you think about Porro on one side, who we know can't really defend.
True.
Reguilon's very small on the left, and then Romero and Tanganga are not big centre backs, are they? By any means.
No, Romero's the tallest by far.
And Reguilon got caught because he went for it with his foot. And I think that might be just having grown up in the Spanish game. That clearing at the far post, again, I'm probably saying something that isn't true, but in England we play football. Heading the ball is part of the game, right? But for a fullback abroad, it feels like those balls that come in on the corner, they might be less likely to really put themselves on the line to block it. And whereas Ings attacked it with his head, Reguilon waited so he could then volley it clear, and that's where the mistake was. It wasn't necessarily a mistake of skill. It was just an upbringing somewhere different that can't deal with players like Ings doing that. Anyway.
Yeah. So half time, we had a full change of teams. So Brandon Austin came in goal. Emerson Royal right back. Sanchez and Davis, an interesting centre half pairing. We obviously lots of links with Sanchez leaving us soon. We all hope. Udogi,
Udoji. Yeah.
Destiny came in at left back, not left wing back, obviously. Sar, Højbjerg in the pivot. Divine playing he was playing more right wing, wasn't he, in Kulusevski's role? The Chelsea played left side. Perisic played left wing, and a very, very rusty looking Richarlison came in up front. So I think you're definitely right. West Ham were 2-0 up and basically just did a David Moyes and park the bus almost, didn't they? With trying to hit us on the counter attack. So it was always going to be a different challenge, which I think is quite useful. What were your? I mean, I thought of this team from what I saw. Udogi, looked very good, and he's a big lad, isn't he? HG.
Look, I think the players that we see there, a lot of them suited the system, let's say, more. I think Royal, bearing in mind that we talk about a 4-3-3, but Ange wants his fullbacks to become basically next to Bissouma. So you've got a 2, then a 3, then the 4 attacking midfielders, and then the striker. It's almost like a 2-3-4-1. And I think Royal and Udogi were more comfortable moving into midfield than Reguilon or Porro. I think Porro has the skill set to do it, but I think he's just a little bit nervous about being caught out. Whereas maybe Royal, maybe he should be a bit more nervous, but he's not. So I think that functioned. And Sanchez and Davies didn't have to do a great deal apart from make sure that their lone striker or their striker was handled. I think Højbjerg doesn't really work as a 6. I think Bissouma played better there than he did. I think Sar played very well. We saw glimpses of. I think one of my favorite pass of the game was a pass that Sar made from kind of in his own half, almost across field, but he found Lo Celso, who could then spin it on and found Perisic pretty quickly after that. That role suits Perisic much more because his focus is on attacking. Lo Celso, it's the perfect system for him. It really is. And Divine, look, I don't think he was amazing, but I think he did everything that you would want him to do.
He didn't stick out like a younger kid would, I think, and kind of get lost, or he was able to not be bullied, or really I don't know what the right word is for that, but someone can maybe who's not ready for that level can stick out in a bad way, and he didn't seem to do that. He actually sort of was able to hold his own.
He made good decisions. We all know that right wing is not his favorite position. He doesn't really want to be out there. He wants to be a bit more involved. But with all the runners that were running inside, like Sar and even the fullbacks getting forward, Divine could kind of just hug the touchline a little bit. So he felt very much like almost a right-footed Perisic in the fact that he either crossed the ball or he played it inside to Lo Celso or to Sar or to someone else. So he let's say he knew his role within the team so much. He didn't try and do something that he couldn't do, but he just made smart choices at keeping the ball, which obviously goes down well, right?
I agree with a lot of that. I don't really know what else that HG said that I wouldn't have already probably have brought up. Maybe just Richarlison, yes, he looked rusty, but I think it's actually just him just being so desperate and anxious. And that's what's coming across right now. And I think it's the fact that it's the anxiety of not scoring as many goals as he probably would have liked to last season. I think it's also the fact that he wants to impress maybe in this type of striker role where he can be by himself without Harry Kane, and he can maybe do things that maybe Harry Kane can't with all the running and all the pressing and sort of kind of just the movement in itself. But I don't know, he just looks so desperate and so just kind of eager to score that he got in his own way. I think you maybe brought up earlier, that's the only thing I would add. Lo Celso, on the other hand, I would maybe say I've been a big Lo Celso skeptic or even hater kind of in the past. I've always like kind of just what people have claimed with his like ability on the ball and everything. It's just like there have been so many games where I would say I haven't seen it that I am often confused because I can point to so many outside the foot passes that he's played that were completely unnecessary that ended up going out of bounds or ended up, actually not playing the man through. There's so many corner kicks, not even just the compilation against Everton where he really had a mare of a game, but there are other corner kicks I can recall where he's just unable to get it 6 feet off the ground. And that's been my really harsh sort of criticism of him is I feel like there have been times where I've watched Lo Celso be unable to like kick it, above a certain, speed and be unable to kick it above a certain, height above the ground. And then there are other games where he's doing it like he just did in that friendly where he's just running the whole show and everything goes through him. So I'm kind of waiting to be proved wrong on him. And I'm also curious whether he played that well because he has so many different people that want him that was just maybe a bit of a compilation reel for people to kind of bid a bit more for him to get the deal done. But yeah, Lo Celso definitely proved me wrong, at least in that 45 minutes. And it was just interesting that the midfield was actually so much better than I thought actually the midfield was in the first half. I don't know maybe why that is. It could be because Skip maybe is more uncomfortable in the number 8. It could also be because West Ham obviously were maybe nowhere near as tired. And it could be some other reasons too. But the midfield looked like it was so much more comfortable and they all knew their roles. They all knew what they needed to do. And they just were functioning more how we kind of expected each role in that midfield to work than kind of the first half, it felt like. And I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe it's just because each of them were just playing that well. Honestly, it could be that case.
I feel as if you were going to pick the best midfield that Spurs played in the game, to me it would be Bissouma in the first half and then Sarr and Lo Celso in the second half. And that would be the best three that we saw. And I feel like the best fullbacks were probably Royal and Udogie. And I feel like it would almost certainly be Romero plus Davies, I guess, because Tanganga didn't look so good. But you could take what we saw, 45 minutes from pretty much every player, and build what you thought the best 11 might be from that. Okay? And maybe it would mean that you move Solomon across, but that's kind of what Ange wants to see. I think he understands that not everyone will be able to do it straight away, but if you see players that seem to want to play that kind of football, like Lo Celso, I see some of the comments about, Lo Celso may want to leave. Yeah, maybe he does. Maybe there is a team in Spain who will play him every single game, and he doesn't know that with Spurs right now, and he doesn't want to be on the fringes of things anymore. We haven't seen Dombele in this, so there are lots of things. But I was excited because to me, Lo Celso likes to play balls with runners, right? He's going to be the guy that might drop a little bit deep, but then he'll make those runs. Or Sarr, because Sarr's got the energy and the legs to really get beyond people. I'm excited to see that kind of, bearing in mind that Bentancur is out for the next few months. I'm excited to see Bissouma and Lo Celso play. Hopefully in the next game. I think the two of them might work really well together because I feel like I've said this before on shows. Sometimes it's not just about individual quality; it's about who really works with each other, right? And some players they just have that link. Like when Kane, when we were really good with Desk, it was Kane and Dele that there were two. Right, you never really saw Kane and Son interact, and then Dele kind of fell away, and Kane and Son, after playing together for years, became the partnership where they now know what the other one is thinking, so they go and do what works. And I think that Ange's job right now is to try and figure out, who has a relationship that they understand each other, because even at the back, you're going to need players who show that.
So, do you think Sarr could play the 6 role?
I think Sarr is good enough to do any of it, but I think Sarr is probably best in Ange's system based on who we have as a 6. I think Bissouma is a 6. I think Skip, if he's going to play, is a 6. And I think Sarr, bearing in mind that we've got Bentancur and Lo Celso and Dombele and other options to be an 8. Maddison, there you go, right? I knew there was one I'd forgotten. That if Sarr's going to get minutes, it's going to be, to me, as kind of a Bissouma rotation option. I just think Sarr has the ability to pass the ball of either foot. I don't think he gets phased under pressure, unlike maybe Skip might. And so it's weird. Like, I think he's a really good player and could easily play as an 8, but right now we have options I'd rather see play as an 8, which is why I'd probably put him as a 6.
So, what would be your starting midfield if the Premier League starts tomorrow and they're all fit? What would be your starting midfield? I'll ask you both for this, HG.
If they're all fit, it
Yeah.
would be Bissouma as the 6. It would be Bentancur on the left-hand side, and it would be Maddison on the right-hand side, if all were fit.
Same for me. If Bentancur, who he won't be fit first game of the season,
Right.
I'd be tempted to actually play Papa Matsasar, or maybe if Gio or Tanguy continue to prove themselves more and more and more throughout the coming season. One of those.
I mean, like right now, because Bentancur is not going to be fit, if you took him out of it, based on what we've seen, it would be Lo Celso. It would be Bissouma, Lo Celso, and Maddison.
Yeah.
But I like.
But what's weird about that is then Lo Celso is playing in a different position to when he played in that West Ham game. Like Lo Celso was basically playing, I think, where Maddison was,
Yeah, but I would move Maddison to the other side because Lo Celso and Maddison both played that left-hand side in the friendly, but I think Lo Celso is best on the left, and I think Maddison would be more suited to the right and move him across. But it's, again, like we have lots of options. Like I see us linked to people like Conor Gallagher and other attacking midfielders, and I think, but we don't need 8s. Right now, we don't need 8s. I understand Højbjerg may well go. It looks like he's probably the one that is okay with leaving, and it works for the club and it works for everyone. Because I don't think he has the legs to be a 6, really. And I do think that in this system, the 6 is basically your third centre back, right? He's the one that has to be able to recover, as we saw when Højbjerg got when he lost the ball for West Ham's winner. Suddenly there were just 2 behind him, and it was Sanchez and Davies, and that was it. And so that 6 has to be really careful and have the recovery speed to maybe get back and deal with things if they can. And Højbjerg just doesn't have that. And although Bissouma is not super fast, I think that he and Sarr and to an extent Skip, because he's, I think, more defensively minded anyway, could do it. But we've got lots of options, and it's a great chance for Ange to figure out who might work.
Yeah. So obviously, Lo Celso got the first goal from an inadvertent Davinson Sanchez assist. I think you probably call it the old 50p head.
Yep.
Fell to Lo Celso, didn't it? And then Udogie with a lovely backward header from, was it a Perisic corner? Or was it the second one?
That's Perisic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do think I was worried about him defensively, but he did look very good, I thought, at that left back and pushing into midfield. Jack.
Yeah.
It could all be sort of like tactic based, that like he might not actually end up being caught out defensively as much as we probably originally think or could anticipate. And he does have all the attributes to make a really good fullback. He's tall, he's fast, he's good at carrying the ball, has, the sense about him to be able to make things happen in the final third. And then also, like we kind of sort of said, he's, has maybe more of Premier League attributes needed to kind of be able to handle your own as sort of a fullback, defensively, whether it be in the physical department or in other areas, like maybe even just when it comes to winning headers. Like, how important has Emerson even been for us at times at being able to win headers at the back post? Udogie, I'm not sure if he's going to be as defensively sound as Emerson, but the fact that he has a similar height and stature to Emerson, again, will be very helpful and useful. So I don't know. He has all the attributes to be a brilliant fullback. I was kind of a little thrown off by a lot of maybe Italian experts who might know more about Udogie than I do, but the just sort of like the real stubbornness that they were saying, now he cannot play as a fullback. Like, he is absolutely, steadfast to being wingback. It's like, even before he came here, like on first impressions, you were like, yeah, maybe he might struggle here and there, but he doesn't look like he won't be completely confused or like completely like foreign to him, like, because he has, I think, a lot of attributes that would make it, quite easy for him. I would even argue similar thing with Spence, but maybe not so as much. But Spence is also quite tall and also quite has that, similar attributes to what could be a standard good Premier League fullback. But Udogie maybe has, I would say, a bit more end product, at least going forward, than Spence does by the looks of things, and that could actually go his way. But yeah, very impressed with him.
Like, if you take into account that, like, if Ange isn't playing a 4-3-3, right, and he's playing what in effect is a 2-3-4-1, well, the one is a striker, so his job doesn't really change. And the four attacking midfielders, where you've got two eights or like creative eights who want to be there, and you've got wingers who want to be there. And then your centre backs, well, they're basically there as the last line of defence, which is where a centre back should be. So to me, the most vital part of this system is the fact that the fullbacks can go into midfield and be useful, right? And we've seen with Man City and we've seen with Arsenal last season that they had players who were comfortable doing it, whether it was Zinchenko for the Goons or Stones or even Walker was doing it at times, but Stones was more comfortable doing it, would become that. I mean, in their case, that it was more like a 3-2-4-1 because they kept three centre backs behind, but they were still able to do it. And so the fullback position is the most vital thing for Spurs right now. And we have lots, right? So to me, it's a question of, well, what kind of fullback do you want? As Jack said, I completely see the idea of Udogie and Spence mirroring each other. They offer similar things. They offer size, they offer speed, they offer something different in that way. And Udogie, because he used to be a wing back much more than maybe Spence did, is more comfortable being further up the pitch. We haven't seen enough of Spence to really know if he can or if he can't, but still, we've seen him at Forest as more of an attacking fullback rather than a midfielder kind of pushed inside. Then you've got your defensive fullbacks, right? Which to me would mean Royal or Davies. Right? They're the ones that, maybe we're under the pump a little bit. We can't play how we want to do, so we're going to go for an old school 4-3-3, maybe even a 4-5-1, where we have a flat back four. Then they're the best two for that particular situation. Like if I'm playing Manchester City, I'm not going to go gung-ho with two attacking fullbacks to try and move into midfield because I understand I may need a bit more defensive nous. And then to me, you need to have that kind of the creative midfielder, the one that sees the pass. And I think Porro, with his crossing ability, will be able to do that. Like again, if we need to have options to break down a stubborn defence, then our fullbacks can be midfielders that can cross a ball. Like I'd much rather see Pedro Porro, like maybe 10 yards behind the corner of the 18-yard box, hitting a first-time cross into the box than I would Spence. Right? So once you've figured out who those kind of fullbacks are, then you decide how you want to build that team. And to me, you can't have Udogie and Spence, it wouldn't work. And you can't have Davies and Royal, really, because it wouldn't work. You'd want to have one do it. So maybe Davies as the left-sided fullback and Porro as the more creative one to move into midfield. Like, we've got options, and I love that because to me, those are the positions that need to learn what they're going to be doing and what they're going to be asked. Everyone else is kind of do what you're good at in an area where you want to be, right? The wingers will be asked to beat their man, and we saw it so many times, try and find someone in the box, either from a pullback or straight across. We saw crosses from Perisic in the area of Richarlison numerous times in that second half. So the fullbacks have to be it. And I didn't say Reguilon's name because I don't think he fits it. So Spurs need to find that left-sided midfielder who could maybe play fullback but actually be asked to be in midfield. And I think we have one on tour already. I think there's
Harvey
one out
White.
there who could do it. Harvey White. I think Harvey White could be that left-sided Porro. And
Oh,
again, then
lost
it's a
him.
case of it's just
Okay.
picking and choosing what you want to do. That's it, right? And so I'm making it sound more simple than it is, but I do think that's the key area. We need to buy centre backs, obviously, but for adapting to Ange's system, it's the fullbacks who have to do it almost more than anyone else.
Yeah, Jazz Jones has posted this 245 watching. There's actually 258 watching now since he typed this. Only 36 thumbs up. Please do click that like button for us. It really helps us, especially when we get over 100. Apparently, it really helps the algorithm to make this particular video stream grow and people will catch up. We've got a huge number of people watch this show in Australia now. Can't think why we've suddenly got a big Australian contingent, apart from the fact we've got a load of Aussies.
Recruited
And
well.
Because they
I'm
can
just
watch it
going to
over
break
breakfast.
this.
It's because they can watch it
Yeah,
over
yeah,
breakfast.
absolutely. I'm just going to break this. I'm going to hide the comment. I'm just going to break this up. Jack, are you aware of our Australian slang A to Z that JP's been making? Have you seen any of these videos? They're in our
I might have
shorts.
actually caught a
Well-
glimpse of something of this, but
Well,
sort of
He's
mostly
just
unaware.
dropped. This is 41 seconds long, so please don't turn off. I'm going to put this. This is the letter E. Okay, I'll see you in 40
The
seconds.
Ange fever has officially hit boiling point down under, and despite it being the dead of winter, it's got heads and eskies across the country as Spurs touch down on tour. What's an esky, I hear you say? Well, strap in for another lesson in Australian. The esky is a staple household utensil, playing a dual role in both the kitchen and backyard cricket, making it a favourite wedding gift of your Uncle Wayno. You know, the old bloke with a mullet who spent the whole night out front with a durry and a can of Fraser Forsters trying to chat up Auntie Shazza. The esky is a rectangular chest packed with ice to keep your butcher's rejects cool for travel. Once emptied, it stood up long ways to make stumps for a game of 6 and out. So there you go, Spurs fans. Want to learn more? Go find the podcast.
Impressive.
Done. And we've got A to E all on our shorts on YouTube. So if you want to catch them, have a look. But yeah, JP's making those. I'm guessing he'll be doing F. I'm not sure. I want to know what F's going to be, HG.
You're flaming galah. I don't know if that counts as an F or a G, but
yeah,
they are fun because like we definitely have an Australian, like obviously our head coach, but with Scott Munn being at the club maybe, and we're there right now on pre-season. And yeah, Australia, like cricket is the sport over there, but soccer, when soccer as they call it, but soccer, it's a big deal for them to have Ange. So he was on their 60 Minutes show, I think, during the week.
I saw that,
which is a big deal for that. They recognise that this hasn't happened before, and so he's box office.
Yeah, I'm afraid B wasn't Biffo, was it? I can't remember what it was now.
D was Drongo. C was Cobber, I think. But I don't remember what B was. I really should know.
Well, Dan, after the show, have a look at our YouTube shorts so you can watch it.
There you go.
There you go. You could do F and G. There you go.
Flaming Gillar.
Kerry's got the question. Where is Scott Munn? Has anyone seen this man?
Isn't he wearing a Wally costume and we don't know where he is?
He was at something. Ali Gold said he spotted him recently. He was at some sort of big Spurs related event, but was there at a non-capacity sort of thing, which is of course all not, I don't know. I think he's technically around. I bet he's either right next to Daniel Levy or doing something on his own, but he seems to just be floating around in a non-capacity role. And maybe it's also the case that Spurs are probably not taking any pictures of him or anybody who are taking any pictures of him because he's supposed to not be technically doing work, so that could also be the case. That's a theory of mine.
Look, I'm not being funny, but I'm not bothered.
Yeah, neither am I.
I mean, it sounds weird. I'm like, what would he have been doing for Spurs right now? Does anyone really know? Like,
well, it's such a bird's eye view type role that he's taking on that
Yeah.
I just don't understand why he needs to be taking it over like tomorrow or in the next moment. Like, because everything he's going to be doing is like from such a huge like kind of vantage point, and it's kind of like hiring, I don't know, like a major person in a corporation, like one of the next person next to the CEO or something. It's sort of like you usually take your time with that, and it's not like that person fixes things overnight usually.
I think the view is they want Mr. Levy far away from the transfer deals.
That's fair.
Figure that Scott Munn will be doing it. Obviously, we've still yet to get anywhere with the director of football, as far as we know. Doesn't mean that it's not in the background happening. But yeah, I guess time will tell. We've obviously lost Steinson, who's gone to Leeds, which is a random move.
Well, they needed one because I think they sacked their last guy after getting relegated. So, and I think the last guy got a pretty good job in Spain. But yeah, Steinson's gone to Leeds, and I don't know. Like I know that Paratici is officially not Spurs, but I think we all believe that unofficially he's still very much Spurs. But yeah, I don't know. I just I try not to get too concerned about things because so many people. I know we haven't talked about centre backs yet, but so many people are so concerned we haven't got a centre back, and we're halfway through pre-season, and the first game's in 3 weeks, and all those things are true. But it's just not worth getting annoyed about. Like, I would love it if Spurs went and signed all the players I think we should sign, but they won't. They won't ever do that. Even if I was in charge, they probably wouldn't be able to do those things. And so I just watch and I support it, and I don't let it bother me so much. I understand that, none of us want to see a left centre back start against Brentford, who we know very well, but. Ange has only been manager for 3 weeks, and we've got 3 weeks until the first game. I think that we're so eager that we're forgetting that it may take a little bit more time. And if it takes another week, okay. Do you know what I mean? Like if we sign someone now, they're probably not going to fly out and join the rest of the squad for for a 2 or 3 day thing in Singapore. So I suspect everything will happen once we get back to England.
Talking of which, shall we move on to centre backs? Are we going to sign a centre back in the next, what have we got, month and 10 days, Jack?
Yes, but I am sort of one of those people that I think you were referencing HG on the the frustration end of the center back department. I more kind of mean that I do feel like Ange has been hindered by not having one on the plane of some kind to be able to work with. I did not expect Tapsoba and Van de Ven, or Tapsoba or Van de Ven plus somebody else to be on the plane. That would have been kind of, way out of, Spurs's sort of usual way of going about it. But it did feel like it would have been helpful for him to have somebody of some kind to use in the left-sided center back position that would have made sense other than this sort of trial experiment with Tanganga. And I even think it would be the same thing with Davies. It would be the same thing with Rodon. It would be the same thing with Sanchez. It'd be the same thing with Eric Dyer. Them playing that left-sided center back would be pretty much just failure, and it won't really be realistic for the next and up-and-coming season. So I do feel like Ange has been slightly hindered by technically not being able to see the best version, or close to maybe one of the better versions of his team, with, just having to just use what I think to be is just sort of trial experiments. They're just going to fail with the various people he has to pick from at left-sided center back. So I feel like I'm disappointed that we don't have one in yet. But to answer the question, I do feel like we'll get in Tapsoba or Van de Ven, and then it will be plus a surprise player of some kind that I imagine will be probably quite clever, knowing Spurs. Usually it's that type of signing that we'll get right. the clever, unexpected signing.
The Bentancur.
Yeah, exactly.
The one
Like we'll
that no
get
one
like a Max
expected.
Kilman or something out of nowhere. Or we'll get like somebody that we haven't heard of, that has like a backup, right-sided center back that's actually quite clever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Phillips was linked with a £3 million move, and then yesterday there was then discussions that we haven't actually agreed a price for him, but he's had a medical, which seems a bit odd to me, HG.
Yeah. I mean, what is it that Blackburn want now? 5 million? I mean, I don't blame Blackburn, but I don't know. Like, if he's that highly rated, why are they selling him? Are they that desperate for money? It seems a
They
bit
are
odd.
in a really bad financial position.
Okay.
Yeah, they're apparently fire sale.
So, I mean, I don't know. But again, to me, that's one maybe for next season. I mean, Dorrington's 18, Ashley Phillips is 18. Then they're not going to be playing for Spurs, you wouldn't have thought. So they'll need loans somewhere else. But, again, this is what we did with Walker and Norton. I mean, we signed them at 19, and then they went off and did loans at QPR and wherever they were before they came back and actually started playing for Spurs at 2021. So, as much as it's nice to be signing these players, they need to have a pathway, and that pathway isn't at Spurs this season. It's going to be going somewhere else. Like, if you're Blackburn, I mean, do you not just say, hey, look, give us 4 million and we'll take him on loan for the season? And then he gets to stay at home, be around his family for another year before making the move to Spurs. That seems like a relatively smart thing, but what do I know?
Yeah.
I do think we'll get one before the start of the season, and I think we'll get a second before the end of the window. So I'm not massively concerned. I'm just concerned as if Romero or someone gets injured, then we will have to play one of the old guard. But I do think we'll sign one before Brentford. I can't imagine we wouldn't.
Just backtracking, I do have an update on the Scott Munn situation, courtesy of Paddy, because he tagged me on Twitter. So I've done it the old school way via the brands rather than doing a slideshow. If you look in the middle, just behind that lad with the cap, there is Scott Munn at the side of the pitch.
There you
So
go, in Perth.
he is there. He's on his gardening leave in Perth. There you go.
Yeah. So the centre backs, like Van der Ven doesn't seem to go away. It seems to be Yeah, I mean, I get this understanding of Dorrington, but he's still so young. Like, I can't. Yeah, like surely Ange has watched the kids in training. You'd imagine someone would have said, "We think this guy is ready, maybe to be that option." I mean, he's not like Ryan Mason's been there a while. He's still at the club. So, and Matt Wells has been at the club before, even though he's just come back. So, yeah, we have options, but I think that bearing in mind the biggest part of Ange's job really was figuring out who we wanted to keep. Like I think that's pre-season really was like who are these 30 odd players do I actually want to have around? Do I want to keep Perisic for a year, or do I want to give those minutes to Brian Hill? Can I afford to sell Brian Hill so that I can then spend like those are the questions that matter, and maybe he hasn't had the opportunity to do that fully yet, and he doesn't need to pull the trigger right now.
It's interesting. Rich on our Patreon HG, he went to the Enfield Town v Spurs under-21s the other night. He watches a lot of Enfield games, and Dorrington and Charlie Sayers were the centre backs, and he actually made a comment how Sayers looked so assured. Particularly, obviously, Sayers is the young guy we got from Southend who can play left back or left centre back.
And he's a big
So
guy,
maybe that's the
Sayers,
option.
too. Like he's one of those 18, 19. He's one of those 18, 19-year-olds that look about 24. Like I feel like Charlie Sayers has done 3 years in the army. Do you know, it's just got that kind of demeanor from pictures. I've never seen him play, but yeah, like if there are options in the academy that could come in and be that again 4th or 5th choice, then maybe Ange might consider it. But even 4th seems an unnecessary. I mean, I'd rather that Sayers was 4th choice over signing Longley. I don't see any reason to sign Longley at all. But again, like if we could have Tapsoba, Romero, Van der Ven, and Sayers, I'm all right with that. I'm absolutely all right with that. But we need to make sure that we then get money for the people that are going, because Sanchez might get 10 million, and Dyer, if he chooses to leave, which he may not. Again, like Dyer and Harry Kane, they sit next to each other on the plane, right? They are clearly very good mates, and I think it's been reported that Dyer has no intention of going. So if that's the case, then okay, that's fine. At least we know. But then you work around it. But there are clearly talents in our under-18s. Certainly in the under-18s, like Dorrington's age group. Mikey Moore's too young and Iro's too young. But there are talents down there that could, in a year or two, be a worthwhile, 4th choice. But I think we don't need to be pushing them into that role right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate we're not in the Conference League because we could have blooded quite a lot of these guys, but we have got a second League Cup second round game at the end of August, which, as you pointed out a few weeks ago, actually, we could be out of the League Cup before we get to September. But there is a chance for maybe not those kids, but some of the peripheral players certainly to get some game time, especially as Ange is trying to get the Ange ball going, as it were. Your mother is not happy. There's a lot of exclamation marks there. 269 watching. Only 124 likes. Come on, guys. Please click the like button. We appreciate it muchly.
We really do.
What's your view on the youngsters, Jack? Centre backs.
I believe Charlie Sayers, like HG has said, is a very talented and kind of versatile and big player. But Dorrington, I think, is also of a similar sort of kind of like much bigger look for his age. Like he's also very young, but even in the final and against Villa, like he stood out like in the fact of how tall he is and how just sort of massive he is for his age. So I think he'll actually probably be potentially the future if Ashley Phillips, if that thing does go through. I see it more as like a Dorrington Phillips sort of homegrown. I'm not sure if Phillips will qualify as much to be from the academy, but he would definitely qualify of some kind, to be from, our type of homegrown, sort of quota. And then Dorrington being from our own academy is going to be great. So I see them as sort of maybe the future kind of England center backs that Spurs are trying to develop. And to be honest, when it comes to young players in general, John and HG, it seems like Spurs have been investing so much more in just like younger talents to like filter in through the academy for the future than they ever have in my regard, at least to my knowledge in the past. And from what I've heard, that is sort of related to what it's not like it was Paratici that deliberately did it, but it was some of the people that Paratici hired that were brought into the club that seem to have kind of undergone this sort of kind of more higher profile type players to bring into the academy. And it's this kind of, conflict between bringing in young and hungry players that, aren't, as maybe high profile as others. And then also bringing in, guys that actually are really high profile, talented kids that could end up playing for an Ajax or a Dortmund, sort of academy and, keeping their future. And I'm kind of more towards the latter, the more talented, higher profile type players, because at the end of the day, only so many of them even make it anyways. So it just sort of feels like maybe go for more of that Man City approach, where if the kid doesn't end up making it, you can still sell him for like 12 or 13 million and make a bit of coin out of it. And or he's so talented that you practically have to make a pathway for him to get into the first team. I'm kind of leaning towards that. And it seems like we're doing that with the center backs, with the attackers, with the midfielders. I mean, there's so many players I could name right now that seem to be well talented. I've never seen in a year so many times Fabrizio Romano posting about under 18s, like Tottenham players. So that's a good sign.
I mean, this is it. Like you take the Man City model. I mean, obviously, when it was easier to sign people from all over Europe, then they did, right? So Lavia was there, but he's a Belgian player. But they've sold a bunch of teenagers for, is that 8 figures, 10 million? Yeah, it is, right? Like
Yeah, I swear there's always some random 13 million, 12 million thrown on it. And you're like,
and we're buying 18-year-olds for 2 million, 3 million, because we spent a lot of money to get Lancashire, I think, into the club. Phillips, if he joins, is the same. Charlie Sayers, I don't know how much but we did get him from
It's about
Southend.
300 grand.
Yeah, it wasn't. But you see what I'm saying? Like, we're not there yet. But those players have to develop, and I think that when you look at the teams like City and Chelsea and all the ones that really, and even Arsenal, they send their best players out on loan, and they run the risk that maybe they never really end up playing for the first team, but they can be sold on. Like Arsenal have got the striker Balogun, right, who went to French football and scored a load of goals in French football and is now seriously wanted, but there's no pathway for him at Arsenal. Not really. Like, if they don't think he's better than Nketiah, then Nketiah and Gabriel Jesus are the main people there. So Arsenal have that choice to make. Right now, Spurs don't have that choice. We have a bunch of really good 18 or 19-year-olds that need games. Alfie Devine is another, right? He needs games. And that won't be at Spurs right now. So get them out on loan, choose it wisely, and they will decide for themselves how they develop. Parrott is another one. I have not given up on Parrott. I know he's 21 now, but 21 is nothing in the scheme of things. If he figures it out this season, wherever he goes, and we can say, hey, we've got a striker who we trust to be, even as a third choice, considering he counts as homegrown, you do that, right? But these players, I don't believe that they will learn enough playing academy football. They need to be out playing senior football somewhere else. And the fact that they're 6'4", 6'5", brilliant. That should only help them, but they need to be playing regular football.
I think my understanding is that if they're homegrown, they don't count towards the loan quota of the number of players you can loan out, because this year you can only loan 7 players out. Obviously, we had 8 last year, and we suddenly realised we sent Doherty on loan to Atletico. We had to release him.
But this just means that, I don't know if Chelsea have done it for these purposes, but Chelsea have invested a lot of money in Strasbourg, right, the French team, and I don't know if they've sold one, but they might be like that. They'll look to sell players to their feeder team, to their sister club, whatever, and then it's not a loan. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone will find ways around it, but the point is, we have to be in a position to do that. Spurs need a club somewhere in Europe that would allow those players to play. Man United did it 25 years ago in Belgium football. And even then, at that point, it was more to get them an EU passport. But still, John O'Shea went to Belgium for a year or two. There were a few others that did. And I just feel like that's a part of football, modern football, that although I don't love, it's got, if Spurs are going to give their players the best chance of making it, the best chance of becoming what we want, which is playing for the first team, then academy football isn't it. And there has to be a pathway for them. I know Liverpool sent a centre-back to one of the teams here in Vienna last season, highly rated centre-back, 6'5", kind of built like Virgil van Dijk, fast, all the rest of it. And he barely played. So they took him home after 6 months. It has to be a move that works so they can play regular football. And I suspect the best way to ensure that is to invest in another club.
Yeah. Where could that be then? There must be
Austria.
one in Austria. It must be one you can find, HG. Get yourself a little job.
Like Austrian football, I don't want to say it's had a resurgence because the national team has got a lot better recently, but the Austrian Premier League, or the First Division as it's called here, has one guaranteed Champions League spot every season, which is Salzburg, pretty much every year. But teams like Lask and Sturm Graz have improved, and so the two teams in Vienna are fighting for the scraps. Like, I think Austria Vienna have a Conference League playoff next week. And then Rapid Vienna, I think, are in the Conference League, but they go in a round later. Like, Austria Vienna would be a decent shout, to be honest. But I'm biased because I live here. But I just feel like if Leicester can have a team in Belgium and Brighton can have a team in Belgium, right, where they sent Mitoma and they sent Undav, the German striker. A whole bunch of them have played there. Even Caicedo, I think, was there for a bit. Why aren't Spurs on this train? I don't understand why we haven't really done that.
If you've read this, actually, Keith's saying that they've restricted now. Brighton had to pull back out of the Belgium club.
Because I know he owned them. Tony Bloom, the Brighton owner, did own.
Right.
I don't know that story, so Keith is probably
There's
right.
nothing stopping Tony Bloom's son owning that club, is it? And this is what
For
Newcastle
example,
have done, isn't
yeah,
it? So,
I mean,
again, there's ways around it, aren't they? Oh, nearly got them thrown out of the Europa League, apparently. There you go.
okay.
But there's ways around most things, aren't there? Yeah. I just wanted to bring up this one. Cheese Room's very own Paul Fellows. There he was. He's an international superstar now. He was on Spurs Play. He was on. He's been on several pods. Been mentioned on the Fighting Cock. He was on Also Spurs recently, and he
Quoted
mentioned in
on
the
the
Athletic.
Athletic. Yeah,
Using the
Yeah,
Ask Ange video, or I did see
he
somebody
was in the
put
Ask
that.
Ange video. Yeah, at the beginning. Yeah, I think Paul's had a good. He originally we were going to do an instant reaction show after Tuesday, but then it got changed into a live, and Paul was going to jump on, so he messaged me going, "Have I got the link?" I was like, "Oh, they've already done it." So. I did say, do you want to come on tonight, or have you got to make up with the wife who went, there's no chance I'm coming on for a while? I think his days in Perth is there. He's got to earn some brownie points back. So
No, we love Paul. He's a really good guy.
hopefully we'll get Paul on. Yeah, Paul likes to give Caller lots of banter indeed. I did see somebody call him a Levy love, and I thought that person has not watched Paul when he's been on this show, because
No,
he's definitely
definitely
called out the ownership. Yeah, what else would we have?
Are there any questions for the people watching? Like, I know there are loads of comments that we can't. Like, I can't look at the comments while I'm talking, and I wish I could. I
Yeah,
see
I've
some
been
of
trying
them
to
come
like
through.
some of them as we go, but there are a lot of comments tonight, which is great. Paul said, absolutely get likes of Parrot and Scarlet. They need a loan. You're right.
Yeah.
And you look at, Andros Townsend had what, 6 or 7 loans. Jake Livermore had 3 or 4 loans. Harry Kane obviously went to Leighton Orient with, who was the midfielder he went with? He went with another player. I
Carroll,
can't remember now.
Tom Carroll.
Was it Tom Carroll? Yeah, he went with Tom Carroll. Then he went to Millwall. Then he went to Leicester and then Norwich, didn't he? And he didn't. Leicester and Norwich, he struggled.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
some players can surprise you.
like Ryan Mason became a Premier League midfielder, although he barely played senior football till he was like 21 because he went on loans and didn't play. Went to France for a year. Like, it almost is a case of
Ryan Mason was at Yeovil with Townsend, actually, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, he had various loans and he never really got any. He was this highly rated Spurs Academy product, and then you send him on
Yeah.
loan and he wouldn't play. And he went to French football and he didn't really play. And yet then he came into Spurs under Poch, and he ended up, that first season under Poch, it was Bentaleb and Mason was our central midfield. So, like, it's all about an opportunity, but if you can control that opportunity, then that would be fantastic.
Jack, Paul is asking a question. If we get Tapsoba and VDV, which we know we're not going to, but if we do we have a quality side?
Yes, because you end up in that case being able to offload so much of the deadwood, because you probably realistically only need to keep maybe one of them, maybe 2, but I don't think there's even a reason for that. So you can then offload Dyer, Sanchez, Rodon, Davies, Tanganga, your choice of, the combination of all the kind of maybe let's say just untalented and let's say you have players that don't really have much of a future. So I think you could probably just pick one of your favorite of those bunch, and then you probably are have a pretty decent side, and then you can look to replace the other the following January, the following summer window. So yeah, I do feel like we'd have a quality side in that case. But
Yeah,
that's
no.
like it's easier said than done. That's like 80 million. Like I said, that's an 80 million defense. That's a 90 million defense. And that's where Spurs, I think I have brought up before. I'd rather Spurs spend 80 million, 70 million, whatever it takes on the defense now than spend 80 million, 90 million addressing, the Harry Kane thing the following summer. Like it's going to take some serious coin and some serious research to fix this defense. And we also must think about too, not having to fix it again, because we've often bought big name, big price players and then end up having to ship them on or, not really sure about them as well. So we really have to get it right, and it could cost a lot of money.
I mean, I haven't given hope on signing both. I really haven't. I think at some point, Ange is going to, we all know it, but Ange will realise that centre-backs are super important in his system, and we have one that could. Like, we love Romero, but he doesn't have the recovery speed that an Ange defender usually does. So I think it's pretty clear that two of them, there are other options, of course, but I think two, well-known, but two names that cost a fair chunk, I would expect to come in. I don't know how many Spurs fans have watched Tapsoba. Like, I watch German football, so I know a bit about Tapsoba, but I've also never seen Van der Ven play, really. Even though I watch German football, if I've seen him, he hasn't really stood out. So it's a weird one, but I definitely think that with the way that Ange wants his centre-backs to play, we need two. We really do need two. And like, Anderson will cost a lot of money. Bremer depends on if Juventus really want to sell. I know Jack brought up Max Kilman. Max Kilman doesn't really have the speed either, but he is comfortable on the ball, which would help. So again, it's pick your poison. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to spend all my money on Tapsoba because he's the one guy who can play both sides, and he's tall and he's fast and he can be that kind of archetypal Postecoglou defender. Brilliant. That's what we do, right? Because he could play left with Romero, or he could play right hand side if we sign Kilman. That could work. But again, that partnership has to be there, and yeah, it's a struggle.
Okay, got a few questions now. It's good. Right, Dan's asking me a question. What's the future for Richarlison? In my opinion, terrible first season, but Kane's future is uncertain. I think number one, he hasn't played in his best position. Number two, obviously, he got injured at the World Cup and really struggled. And number three, it's a confidence issue with him. And as Jack said earlier, he's really snatching at the chances. Is he good enough? Well, he seems to be good enough for Brazil. People saying he hasn't scored enough goals. He scored 14, 15 in a very poor Everton team. So if he's playing in that number 9 role, if he can get past the shooter's block, writer's block for strikers, I can't think what I'm saying, but I think he'll get chances, and I think he could actually be quite successful in that role. But I also think if Kane goes, we will sign another striker.
I know this is for John, so maybe I shouldn't answer, but
No, go for it.
To me, Richarlison is one of those players that loves the physical side a little bit too much. And at some point, he needs to pick his battles and decide that if he can score goals without rolling the centre half, then he should. And I feel like when he leads the line for Brazil, you see more of that ability to hold the ball up, to look and see the runners, and to play those runners in. And at Spurs, because he hasn't played there, we haven't really seen it, but it feels as if he's trying to use his body too much. Like, if there are going to be runners from midfield, Richarlison doesn't need to do that. Like, we saw the chance that Bissouma had in the first friendly when it was played off, I think, Skip, and then Kane barely touched it into Bissouma's pass. But that kind of understanding, I think Richarlison has the ability to do it, but he just needs to do it more often and not try and seek the battle so much.
Okay. Dave saying 3 weeks to go, no centre backs is negligent to the highest degree. And King Huddle has come up with the comment we say quite often. Stop being so negative, David.
No,
You should see what our WhatsApp group's like, King.
that isn't negative for David. That's just
Jack.
normal.
Can Sarr hold down the first team place?
I would argue more so than Skip, but I think Skip is going to be kept around because he's academy, homegrown. He has that sort of, and he loves Spurs and is kind of like what HG brought up with his army looking like players. I think Skip has always looked like, like he's come from the coal mines or something. Like he's a very hard looking type player, but I think he'll always be kept around. But I actually feel like Sarr has a much, much higher ceiling than Skip does, and actually is far more adaptable than I think Skip is. I think Skip is more set as a defensive, destroying type midfielder, where Sarr feels like he could play number 6, number 8, a variety of positions. So I think he has to stay around. And also, one of the first times I was even on the cheese room, I had said during that Conte season of players who we should keep around, I did say that we should keep Sarr around even then. And I think that proved to be, a good decision at the end of the day for when we needed him against AC Milan and other teams. Like he impressed a lot of people and he's shown to enjoy himself at Spurs. He seems to have some buddies on the team. And I think it's just good to have somebody that seems to enjoy themselves, like, that's young around the team, but who's also very talented.
Like if let's say Bentancur is out until November, right? I mean, I don't know when he's out till, but let's say he's going to miss the first 2.5 months of the season. You keep Sarr and Skip around because you may need both, right? But if Bentancur's fit when January comes around, one of them needs to go out on loan. And unless we need Skip for homegrown numbers, that will be a tough call because I think that we have options, but one of those will stay and be the reserve 6 or the backup 6 or the rotation 6, however you want to phrase it. And then one of them will need to go and get minutes. Because again, Skip is 23 almost? Like he's not old, but he needs games. So many of our players need regular football, and like Ange may not be able to deliver it, but at least Ange does strike me as being the kind of manager that will pick based on who we're playing, and he'll pick based on let's say form, and he'll decide maybe after.
And he won't wait till the 81st minute.
There you go. Right, like I mean, again, like I've said this for the last 2 years, but with 5 subs, you can almost plan a substitution. It doesn't hurt you if you decide to say to someone, right, you've got 45 minutes, off you go, right, and then they can use up their energy. And okay, you make 1 sub at half time, big deal. You've got 4 left. I really think that it's an under commented part of the way football is right now. That teams really could almost make it more like having planned substitutions.
Okay, I know Jack needs to shoot very soon. He's got a social life, social engagements to go. So
I have an impressive dinner I have to make for my girlfriend's family.
I'm going to try and race through these, but I do have this really important question from Davo. What's your favourite dipping crudity? Is it grissini sticks or focaccia? Any preference? No? Okay, we move on.
Sorry, I thought you were asking HG first. No,
I was assuming he was asking you. There you go. But yeah, focaccia.
I don't care. Right, Keith saying Man United buy Keith for 80 million. Discuss. Is Onana worth 80 million? Yes or no? Short answers.
Yes, because they wanted him. Is it really 80 million quid? Is that how much they've paid?
I didn't realize it was that much. I have to say. Is it euros? Maybe.
Ten Hag knows him, right? Because he was at Ajax with him. So I think for Man United, they're pretty happy. Ten Hag's pretty happy. But if he's just if he's trying to buy that Ajax side, which it seems like he is, if you think about it, like he's bought Lisandro Martinez and he's bought Anthony, and he's tried to. Yeah, well, very true. He's tried to buy flipping De Jong from Barcelona. And that Ajax side was good, but Lucas Moura was better.
Hey, Jack, does Mbappe being on the market tonight start a bidding war? Although it sounds like he's already signed for Real Madrid.
Is that the thing? Okay, Real.
Well, apparently PSG said he's definitely going, but they haven't agreed any deal with any club.
I mean, they can't decide that. That's the funny thing. Like anyway.
No, if he wants to stay, he can stay, but they'll force him out. He wants to go, doesn't he?
I mean, Mbappe decides himself. I mean, he owns PSG. He pretty much made that quite clear in the last time that it was like a year ago that he signed for PSG and was just given everything by the president of even France, if I'm not mistaken. So it's actually quite sad that he's all of a sudden thrown his toys out the pram after, being given so much attention and so much love by what is also supposed to be a club that, like, it's so weird with Mbappe. Like, is it his boyhood club? Because he really does treat it like, mud, and like, he treats it like the bottom of the crap and on the bottom of his shoe, really, PSG. So I don't know. Maybe him getting thrown into the market does spicy things up a little bit, but I don't know. I'll be honest, I'm not an Mbappe fan. I find him to be annoying.
Yeah,
his whole
okay.
the drama surrounding him, I think, is just insane for somebody that's his age. I get how good he is, but he seems to just draw so much attention for somebody that's only so young and everything. It's quite sad.
Okay. HG, why haven't we looked into signing Anderson or Gahey from Palace? We did inquire about Gahey last year in May. I know that for a fact, but
And
I imagine he's still got 4 years left on his contract.
And we were linked with Anderson when he was at Sampdoria,
Fulham.
even before he went to French football, before he went to Palace or Fulham and Palace and
Yeah, he's
wherever
at Lyon.
he's been.
Yeah,
he's at Lyon. So I think that, I mean, we probably have looked into it. I can't believe we haven't looked into it, but I suspect that, Palace will want serious money for Gahey. They may not want as much for Anderson, but Palace are trying to also build. They're not like the thing with the Premier League is that because of the money they have, every club in the Premier League is usually in a situation where they don't have to sell, right? They sell because someone's got a year left or they've got a release clause or whatever. But is it Liverpool want Doucouré from Palace, and Palace are saying, okay, 80 million and he's yours. And I mean, and they're well within their rights to do so. So I think that as much as it would be nice to go for those players, I think that Spurs still see value in signing people from abroad, and maybe that's the right thing to do.
Okay, so these are our last 4 fixtures. These are UK times, just in of pre-season. For anyone who doesn't know, Leicester City have very kindly stitched Tottenham up a treat with this by saying you can register on their website and watch the game for free and not have to pay for Spurs play or find a dodgy stream or anything like that.
So it's funny. So I looked into this, right? And it says that if you live in Australia, that you can't do it. Apparently in Australia, you cannot watch the game for free on Leicester's thing, which made me wonder why. So if someone in Australia thinks that the Spurs game is being shown on Australian TV, please let me know what channel, because I used my VPN to watch the last game on Australian TV, and it worked a charm. Worked an absolute charm. But for most of you, all you have to do is sign up, and it takes, a couple of minutes. Put in some dodgy email address that you never use for anything else, and you can watch the game on Sunday lunchtime, right?
Yes, Sunday lunchtime. So, are we expecting the same again? 2 halves, or do you think we'll be a 60-minute team and a 30-minute team?
I think 2 halves.
Yeah, I think
2 halves again.
I think we'll see 2 halves in the next game as well. I think that we won't start to see real kind of until the Donetsk game. Then we might see an hour, right? And then the Barcelona game, you'll see an hour, maybe 75 minutes. But I think for the tour games, 45 minutes each. It's the best way.
Yeah, and I don't see Lion City being a major hurdle.
Are you saying we might see Joe Rodon against Lion City?
Depends if he's fit or he's got a mystery injury like the rest.
It will look good because Lion City probably won't do any attacking. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So, gents, thanks very much for joining me. Jack, you need to rush off and do your delicacies for your guests.
I did it's a bit of a crock pot sort of kind of dish that I've attempted here, but it's kind of some other things on the side that I need to get going on. So I have something already, I'm like 75% of the way there. So, I'm not panicking, but yeah, do need to get something, get the other garnishes ready. Garnishes mentioned, got one mention.
And you'll be back in your bi-weekly, fortnightly appearances on the Cheese Room, yeah? So
I messed it up slightly. I think I messed up the order of things, and but look to get back into it. And potentially the next one might not be shot here in this apartment. It could be in a different one. So that's a tier.
Exciting times. Okay, thanks, Jack. And HG, thank you as always for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. I've just seen some of the last comments asking me why I'm in Austria, and my mum's answering for me. So yeah, VPN.
There you go.
We have NordVPN here. I think I paid like 100 for 200 euros for 2 years, something like that. I don't know, but it works great. We watch well between you and me. We watch BBC stuff all the time on our VPN because Austrian TV is not that great. But yeah, it was good to be on. I
And
love
also,
talking Spurs.
you did a quiz this week with the So Spurs guys. Has that been re-released because it got dropped and then it taken off
See
again?
that I don't know. I don't know, but
Okay.
yes, I went on the Oso Spurs. They released it, I think, yesterday. But there were some rumors that maybe the videos didn't sync up perfectly. But
Your video was definitely about 40 seconds behind everyone else on the sync, so
uh,
they've taken it down.
but yeah, so
So
do go and watch it and subscribe to those guys because they're good. So subscribe to us if you haven't
they're
already.
really good guys, yeah.
But Oso Spurs are good guys. We had fun doing the quiz with people from Dr. Tottenham as well. And yeah.
So on that note, I'm going to say, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. And the big Ange we trust.
That's right. Ange's army.